I'd like to do a slightly different kind of build video today. This is a series I'm calling Better Buildcrafting, where I dive deep on one system of buildcrafting to help educate people and really make sure that they know what they're doing and that they can do better builds by understanding the systems of Destiny 2. Today, I want to talk about the Flat Gain Nerf, which is a thing that was added back in Season of the Wish that affects flat ability gains or chunk ability gains. I'm Engineer. So, what is the Flat Gain Nerf? You can see the snip from the This Week in Destiny back in November of last year, but the really short description is that if you get a chunk of ability energy back, you get less depending on the base cooldown. Long cooldowns get less. For grenades and class abilities, this bottoms out at 50% for the longest cooldown abilities. For melees, it bottoms out at 60%. Anything that gives a full refund or targets one specific ability is not affected at all. Community members have fortunately tested this on all the abilities for you. There's a community member named Riot Takeo who did a lot of the original testing on this, and it was very great. I've compiled some of their data and kind of reorganized it and also set it up so it can be more easily compiled in the future as there's changes. I've also included a calculator you can use. I will link that spreadsheet in the description. One other thing I want to mention too is that I'm going to be talking about a lot of different things in this video. Feel free to check the Destiny data compendium, which will also be linked in the description, because it has information on every single ability and it has actual numbers about what these abilities, mods, perks, all of them do. So first, these are the grenade abilities, and these are their flat gain factors between 50% and 100%. So something with a 50% flat gain factor will get half the ability energy back from any of those sources. And these are some of your strongest grenades like shackles or solar grenades or vortex grenades. And then in the next tier up, you see a lot of other really strong work horse ones, things like the aspect of Bleak Watcher. And then on the other end, you see kind of a few oddball ones. Fusion grenades are actually really strong on some builds, but they have 100% flat gain factor, and that's fantastic. Mothkeeper's Wraps have a special grenade, still 100%. Moving over to melees, we have a little bit more condensed because the bottom is 60%. Most of the melees are in 90% category, which is great. So really not too much to worry about there. But you do have a few where they're getting 70%, and then weighted throwing knife for some reason getting hit with that hardest factor. Class abilities have even fewer categories. These are generally organized per class, so your longer cooldown abilities on like Warlock, for example, or Rifts, those always get hit with a flat gain factor of 50%. But you have Phoenix Dive, which gets a flat gain factor of 80%, which is pretty great. Special abilities like Icefall Mantle, Hoarfrost, or Arbor Warden have 100% flat gain factor, so that's pretty great. Now, one thing class abilities do add is a class mod multiplier. So this affects mods that go on your class item piece, and depending on your class ability, you'll get less ability energy back. And so if you're like using a dodge ability that cools down really fast, you don't get as much energy as a Rift, which has like triple the cooldown. To demonstrate this, here's a little bit of math. I've done all the math for you, but here's the results of the math. So one good example is a grenade kickstart. You can stack this up to 3 times, and you can build up to 6 armor charges from the base 3 if you equip 3 elemental charge mods on your chest armor piece. That's 6 total armor pieces to get to that full investment in grenade kickstart, and that will give you 45% ability energy. That's the rated value of it, but the flat gain factor reduces that. So Vortex Grenade would get 50% of that for 22.5%. Grapple Grenade gets like 38.25%, but then some like Fusion Grenade gets the full 45%. Pretty great. Definitely worth using there, but maybe don't want to use that on a Vortex Grenade. A Bomber, that is a mod that goes on your class item piece that is ready to give 10% grenade energy, but it's hit by both these factors. So say you have a Vortex Grenade with a 50% flat gain factor, and you're using Marksman Dodge, which is the fastest cooldown ability in the game, which has a 40% class mod multiplier, you get 2% grenade ability energy. Now, same thing with Vortex Grenade, where you're using a Healing Rift, you're getting 5% grenade ability energy. Either of those are great, so maybe don't worry about that on Vortex Grenades, but I definitely wouldn't run it on the Marksman Dodge. So, I'm going to start listing all the things that are affected by this. If you want to know exactly what these do, once again, refer to the Destiny data compendium, because it's a lot of things. Can't go through all of them in this video, or take an eternity. But starting with mods, where on your arms piece, you have your kickstart mods for grenades and melees. You have your crossover mods that like you use grenade and you get class ability back, or you use your melee and you get grenade energy back. All those are affected. On your legs, it's your mods that use orbs to give you ability energy back. These are all affected, but because of how orbs are generated, it's not quite as painful here. On your class item, you have utility kickstart, which returns class ability energy. And then you have those class mods like bomber, distribution, outreach. And then we also have our finisher mods, like restorative finisher, 1-2 finisher, explosive finisher, and all those are affected by these flat gain factors. This also does affect weapon perks that return ability energy. So things like demolitionist, pugilist, strategist, wellspringer, energy transfer, which is on swords, all get affected by the flat gain factor. You also have a few origin traits like Bray Inheritance from Deep Descent Crypt, or Bray Legacy from the new Vespers Host Dungeon, and then Classy Contender from Guardian Games, or Indomitability from the Into the Light weapons, the Brave weapons. There's a few light subclass elements that are affected. All your elemental pickups that restore ability energy, so Ionic Traces, Fire Sprites, Void Breaches, all affected. Electrostatic Mine, which is a Warlock aspect that helps you generate Ionic Traces, is affected because of that. On Solar, you have Ember of Blistering, Ember of Searing, and the Heat Rises Warlock aspect. On Void, you have Devour, Feed the Void. For the Warlock aspect, Echo of Exchange, Echo of Provision, and Child of the Old Gods aspect. Dark subclasses are hit too. Stasis hit pretty hard because of Stasis Shards, which are once again hit by this. And that'll affect your Grim Harvest aspect, your Tectonic Harvest aspect, and Glacial Harvest for Hunter, Titan, and Warlock respectively. Whisper of Hunger, which restores your melee energy even more, Whisper of Refraction, which restores your class ability, and Whisper of Torment, which restores more grenade energy when you take damage. On Trin, you just have Threat of Fury, everything else is percentage regen gains, and then there's Facet of Balance on Prismatic, which is one of your best sources of ability regen, but once again, flat gain factor makes this a little bit worse. Some exotic armors are affected. Hunter has a couple here with just minor knocks to them. I list them here. Read over if you want to. On Titan, you have Kepri's Horn, which not many people are using. Mask of the Quiet One is buffed this season. It just affects the ability energy returned from taking damage. Mark 44 stand-asides are affected, but generally not in the meta at this point. Warlocks have probably the most things of all the classes. So they have Dawn Chorus, Fallen Sunstar, Getaway Artist, Prometheum Spur, the Stag, and their Solipsism, exotic class item for Prismatic. Spirits of Starfire and Osmiomancy are both affected by this. Even with this though, some of these still work very well. It's just something you have to think about as you're build crafting. Last but not least, one exotic weapon, Traveler's Chosen, is affected by this, but it's not really used by very many people. So with all that out of the way, how do you build now? The biggest thing I recommend is that you focus on exotics and aspects that give you +% regen, or that focus on one specific ability. You want stuff that's going to keep your ability energy charging constantly, or you just want something that's very dialed into an ability, because that's not affected by the flat gain factor. For mods, maybe don't run those kickstarts if the abilities have a flat gain factor that's 75% or less. And then for kickstarts, one more thing to note is that they don't work with multiple charge abilities until all charges are expended. Now, if you're not modding for kickstarts, consider modding for weapon surges and font mods. Also consider generating more orbs. If you really want to spam abilities, orbs are the best way to do that, because there's a lot of sources of them, you can generate a lot, and so can your teammates, and you can use those orbs as well. So, let me highlight a few great exotics and aspects, starting with Hunter. Shinobu's Vow or Lucky Raspberry on Arc are both very great because they focus on one specific grenade each. Combination Blow on either Arc or Prismatic is just extremely strong every time you can use it, because it has a very easy loop to go back from the melee to the class ability and on and on. On Solar, Young Gahamkuro's Spine is very good because it focuses on trip mine grenades, but also don't forget that you can spam Solar melee anytime on Solar by using the knock 'em down aspect with Ember of Torches. As long as you are getting kills, you will constantly regen that melee ability. On Stasis, we have a new exotic this season called Mask of Fealty, and that works on Stasis or Prismatic, but lets you spam your Stasis shurikens much more frequently. And then A kind of general one is Moth Keeper's Wraps. This has a flat gain factor of 100%, so that unique moth grenade will consistently get energy back all the time. It's very usable. Void doesn't really have anything specific that is great for ability regen, unfortunately, but it's still a pretty great subclass. Now, moving on to Titan, we have Insurmountable Skull Fort, which works on Arc or Prismatic. This is actually how I got through the Legend Final Shape campaign on my Titan. On Solar, you have Hallowfire Heart, which has an annoying activation requirement of sitting on your super, but it has very good ability regen. Mask of the Quiet One, buff this season, works on Void or Prismatic. Gives you Devour for grenade energy regen, and will also give you general ability regen every time you take damage. Hoarfrost Z on Stasis or Prismatic is really easy to keep up in looping, and it makes a lot of crystals, which can put out some damage and just keep those abilities looping on Stasis specifically. The by far best thing for ability spamming on Titans though is Heart of Inmost Light. It is just the golden standard for ability spamming, and it works on every single subclass. On Warlock, you can see the list is very long. I will not list all these, but feel free to try all these out. For Arc, you have Fallen Sunstar, Vesper of Radius, and the Arc Soul aspect or Getaway Artist. The Getaway Artists are also very effective on Prismatic. I'd also mention that Vesper of Radius works on every single subclass. It will give you giant class ability regen just for being close to enemies on any subclass, no matter what class ability you're using. Sunbracers on Solar is kind of one of the original ability spam exotics. It's been fantastic ever since. Controverse Hold on Void is one of the best grenade spam exotics in the game. Nezarec Sin requires Void kills, but it does not require a Void subclass. So as long as you're getting Void kills, it will give you very large ability regen just for that. On Stasis, you have Osmiomancy Gloves, which give you 2 charges and will regen those Cold Snap grenades consistently. That works on Stasis or Prismatic. We also have the new exotic this episode, Rhymecoat Raiments, which when paired with Whisper of Shards on Stasis has crazy ability regen, but also has pretty good options on Prismatic. And then lastly, there's Verity's Brow, which will generate very strong grenade ability energy and boost the damage of your grenades just by getting weapon kills that match your grenade. Works on every class and is just a really solid exotic for spamming grenades. Moving over to fragments that work on all classes. Mentioned this just now, but Whisper of Shards, if you shatter a Stasis Crystal, you get grenade regen very easily. Ember of Benevolence on Solar, as long as you apply Radiant or heal your allies, you will get a boost to all your ability regen, and it's pretty substantial, so it lets you play support and be offensive at the same time. Monte Carlo gives melee ability energy every time you hit enemies with it, which is really great. It is not affected by the flat gain factor, so it's really great to use. And then for your Prismatic classes, on your exotic class item, Spirit of Inmost Light is on all 3 classes class items, and it is extremely strong. It's not quite as strong as Heart of Inmost Light. It doesn't boost damage, but it's still very good for having high ability uptime. So, as you're looking at armor mods, how you kind of evaluate whether you use kickstarts or not is you look at these flat gain tables, and if it's below 75%, generally I would not say it's worth it. Sometimes you could maybe make it make sense if you build into it just right, or you have the armor charge generation required for it, made from an artifact mod. But generally, if it's on the top side of that red line, I wouldn't worry about using kickstarts with it. Now, some other things you can do with your mods is focus on surges and font mods. So weapon surge mods go on your legs, and they boost the damage of your weapons, matching those surges. Very strong. It'll use armor charges over time with a normal timer of 10 seconds. So I recommend that if you are running surges, use time dilation, which will take it up to 15 seconds, which is a lot easier to manage and gives you a lot of value for that. If you are running surges, I'd consider running font mods too if you have any gaps in your target stats. Font mods will give you a boost to your stats as long as you have armor charges. For 1 mod, it's plus 30 to a stat. For 2 mods, it's plus 50 to a stat. For 3 mods, it's plus 60, which isn't really worth it. You can run this on your gauntlets for strength or discipline. And then on your class item, you can run it for recovery, which is usually a good way to kind of buff up that stat that you're not running quite as much. Legs have mobility, and then your head has intellect, but neither of those are really too much worth building into. Now, say you still want to spam abilities, what do you do with your mods? Focus on orbs. So your sources of orbs are your helmet mods, which are weapon siphons, your R mods, which are heavy-handed for melees or firepower for grenades. And then on your class armor, the mod Reaper, which will give you a orb on your next weapon kill after using your class ability. There's also some subclass fragments. I'll have a 10-second cooldown that will generate orbs for you, and it's usually a requirement of killing an enemy that's debuffed in some way by that subclass's element. Now, for heavy-handed, firepower, and Reaper, there's another effect in that you can stack these mods to reduce the 10-second cooldown. So when you put 2 copies, that 10-second cooldown goes to 5 seconds. When you have 3 copies, that cooldown goes down to 1 second, which is fantastic for abilities that sit out on the field for a while, like a vortex grenade, or melee abilities that you can spam constantly because you have lots of armor charges or just crazy regen. And those orbs can be used for healing you, they can be used to get your ability back. Lots of uses for orbs, and they benefit your team. And also don't forget that all orbs also restore your super ability energy so that you can spam your super more often. What do you do with those orbs? You want to eat them up and use them to generate more abilities. So you have a few mods, and all these are on your legs for how you use those orbs. The first one is Innervation, which gives you grenade energy when you pick up an orb. It gives you 10% grenade energy specifically. Invigoration gives you 10% melee energy on orb pickup. And then Insulation gives you 4% class ability energy when you pick it up, which is generally pretty bad because you have the mod Absolution, which will give you 5% to all those abilities whenever you pick up an orb. It does have more energy cost on that leg piece, but it's better than Insulation in every way. Then there's also Orbs of Restoration, which restores 10% to your lowest charged ability. So if you're focused on one ability, this can be a really good way to get more energy back from those orbs. If you use all 3 of these mods and your Orbs of Restoration is affecting the ability you're targeting, you get 25% ability energy before the flat gain factor. But for something like a Vortex Grenade that has 50% flat gain factor, you're down to 12.5%. Sounds bad, but 12.5% for every single orb when you can generate 3 to 5 orbs on every use of it is pretty fantastic. Now for picking up orbs, you have a couple options here. You have Powerful Attraction, which will suck in all the orbs whenever you use your class ability, and that goes on your class armor. Or you can use Shoot to Loot, which is a weapon perk, which lets you shoot the orbs and pick them up that way. Now, I want to get into a little bit of gameplay here for each of the classes, kind of demonstrating how all this works together, but especially the orb generation. So I'm going to go through each class. You can kind of see what I'm doing here, and I'll explain how roughly what the build is. If you're familiar with Buildcrafting, you've probably seen these builds before. So first up, we have the Hunter. This is a pretty standard arc combination blow build. You dodge, creates jolt, and as you punch, and every one of those punches will give you an orb. So because I'm running triple heavy-handed here, every single combination blow kill gives me an orb. And then Spark of Amplitude will also give me an additional orb when I kill a jolted enemy every 10 seconds. So every so often you just see like 3 or 4 orbs pop up there because it's really effective. But this works on Prismatic too, just a constant source of orbs every time you punch. Triple heavy-handed is very effective with it. And moving over to the Titan. This is the tried and true Consecration Spam. This is on Prismatic, but it works just as well on Solar as well. Once again, we're doing triple heavy-handed because it makes every single use of it create an orb. See that there. Each consecration. One thing to note here is that you don't necessarily need to do the second slam of consecration if you're fighting weaker enemies. That first wave of fire when you lift up will sometimes kill them, and if you just do that, you'll use half your melee charge, which is fantastic. Do a little bit of super here, just take care of long range cyclopses, but yep, you can see a large slam here, orbs all over the place. Very effective. Now for Warlock, we're doing something slightly different. This is a Controverse Hold Void Warlock, so there's grenade spamming. And because this sits on the field, it can continue to generate orbs as enemies walk into that vortex. So you can sometimes see that. We're also running Echo of Harvest, which when we kill weakened enemies, will generate an additional orb every 10 seconds. So that's another source. See, I kind of rock on this group here. See that die. Another enemy walks in. We actually weaken him and then let the vortex finish him off because that's an extra 2 orbs thanks to the firepower mods and the Echo Fire Vest. Throw into the group, bunch them all up, turn them into orbs. Now, just to re-summarize again, if you are working around the flat gain factor, really pay attention to exotics and aspects to give you +% regen, fragments as well, or something that gives you regen just for a specific ability, usually exotics. For mods, look at your kickstarts, see if they make sense, see what your flat gain factor is for the ability you care about. Maybe mod for weapon surges and font mods if kickstarts don't make sense, because weapon damage is always going to be good. And lastly, if you really want to ability spam, focus on orb generation. You can make a lot of orbs, so can your teammates. And even though these are affected by flat gain factors, you'll make so much it'll kind of overcome it. And that's really it for the guide, y'all. I hope that's been beneficial to you. I hope you learned something. I'll have a lot of references in the description of this video. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out in the comments. If you found this helpful, make sure you like. If you like content like this, subscribe. I have a few other ideas for better build crafting videos, and I'll keep putting out build videos as well. That's all I've got. Thank you so much. Have a good one.